welcome to another horror story. In this video we will be talking about the Black Death, a real tragedy, something no one ever forgets. Let's get straight into it. Oh, and if you like this video, please subscribe and like the video, because it shows that you want more. In the winter of 1348, when the Black Death first reached the coastal town of San Aurelio, the people gave it a polite name. They called it the Visitor. It came on a ship that never should have reached the harbour. At dawn, fishermen saw it drifting in, sails torn, hull listening, no flags, no crew on deck. It moved with the tide and nothing else, like a dead thing pulled along by invisible hands. By the time it scraped itself against the pier, a small crowd had gathered. Dock workers, merchants, a few children who should have been at home. Among them was Elizabeth, a girl of 16 with a red scarf around her neck. The colour almost shocking in the grey chill. Her father, Matteo, was a port inspector. It was his duty to climb aboard. "Stay back," he told Elizabeth, though he didn't look away from the ship. It was smeared with something dark around the railing. Not fresh, not rain. Something else. "Is it from the east?" a merchant asked him, voice too eager. "Spices? Silk?" Matteo didn't answer. He climbed the rope ladder, boots slipping slyly on the frozen rung. The deck greeted him with silence. No shouting, no creaking of ropes, only the slow slap of water against the hull. He walked past abandoned coils of rope, barrels that hadn't been tied down, crates with their lids askew. He found the first body near the main mast. The man was crumpled as though he'd simply sat down and never stood up again. His skin was a dull waxen colour, lips slightly parted. The dark swelling bulged at the side of his neck, distorting his features. Matteo jerked back, hands to his mouth. Everywhere he went, below deck, in the cabins, near the galley, he found more bodies, slumped over tables, curled on the floor. A kind of stillness clung to them, as if they had tried to move at the last moment, but could not. The air was thick with a faint, sour smell beneath the salt. They had died quickly, but not peacefully. Matteo stumbled back to the rail and called down. "No one comes aboard, no one." The crowd below stirred, uneasy. people didn't like being told to stay away from potential goods. What happened? Someone called. Disease, Mateo shouted. The world felt useless and small. He sealed the ship as best as he could. He ordered it watched, forbidden. He wrote a report that evening with numb fingers, his ink blotting as the candle guttered low. He described the bodies, the swellings, the strange smell. He ordered the harbour closed to foreign ships until they knew more. The next morning, the first person in San Aurelio fell ill. Not a sailor, not a dock worker, Elizabeth. It began as a favour. She woke in the night with her hair damp against the pillow, and the feeling that the walls of her room were breathing too fast. In, out, in and out. As if the plaster lungs would burst. A shadow sat at the foot of her bed. For a moment, she thought it was her father, but it was too tall, too thin. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, it was gone. She told herself she'd been dreaming. She drank water. She pulled the blanket to her chin. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed smoke. By morning, her skin burned. Her father sent for the physician. The man arrived with a leather satchel that smelled of vinegar and herbs. He pressed his hand to her forehead, frowned, checked her pulse. When she coughed, he flinched. Has she been near the ship? He asked low. No, Mateo lied. Elizabeth had stood on the fire, close enough to smell the scent of tar and salt and something else wafting from the ghost ship's hull. The physician pulled down the edge of the blanket. Elizabeth's neck was bare, pale, no swelling, no mark, not yet. Keep her away from others, he said. I'll send a tonic. He left quickly. Too quickly. That afternoon, 2 dock workers fell ill. That evening, the woman who ran the bakery collapsed behind her counter. By nightfall, the bells of the church tolled once, twice, 3 times, for 3 fresh dead brought in from the outskirts of town. They began to say the visitor had slipped off the ship and walked the streets. On the second night of her illness, Elizabeth dreamed of the ship. She stood on its deck, barefoot, boards were cold but not wet, and each step sounded too loud, echoing into a vast emptiness where there should have been sky. The horizon was gone. Instead, a grey curtain surrounded the ship on every side, as if it sailed in a world of fog and bone-coloured air. The bodies were gone. Everything was gone, except a single figure standing at the bow. It wore a cloak that might have once been black, but had faded into a tired charcoal, edges frayed as though worn down by touching too many doors, too many bedsides. When it turned, Elizabeth saw that it had no face. Not exactly where a face should be. There was a smooth, pale skin, as blank as old parchment. But as she stared, shapes pressed up from beneath it. Eyes, mouth, and nose, only to sink away again, like fingers in water. Each time a new face tried to surface, she heard a church bell toll softly, far away. "Who are you?" Elizabeth whispered. A dozen mouths moved beneath the skin, forming words that never quite became sound. Then at last, something broke through. "I am the one you made room for," it said. Its voice was not loud, but it filled her head, pushing out her own thoughts. For a moment, she couldn't remember her father's name, her mother's voice, the way the town smelled after rain. There was only that voice and the slow, steady rocking of a ship that had no sea. "You opened the harbour," it said. "You watched me arrive." "I didn't," she said. "I only looked." It tilted its not face. "That is all it takes." She tried to step back, but now the deck was covered in shapes, bundles. She thought, until one shifted and a hand flopped free, thin and grey, the fingers curled. "Why us?" she asked. A ripple crossed its skin, 100 almost faces turning towards her from underneath. "You. There is no you. There is only next," it said simply. Then it reached for her, and its sleeve parted, and she saw what lay inside. Not flesh, not bone, just a great hollow, full of whispering. She recognized some of the voices. They belonged to the sailors, to the dock workers, to people she hadn't met yet. But she knew she would if she lived long enough. Old men, crying infants, clear, terrified children voices. shouting for their mothers. Over them all, a gentle, endless murmur. Make room, make room, make room. When she woke, the swelling had appeared on her neck. The town changed quickly. They stopped ringing the bell for each death because it never seemed to stop. They dug trenches up on the hill instead of single graves. People ignored each other in the streets. Hands folded tightly into sleeves. Doors that had once been left open for neighbours were barred with beams of wood. The word plague was whispered, then spoken, then shouted. They nailed scraps of parchment. The doors where people had fallen ill. Crude signs painted with dark circles. No one visited those houses anymore. Not even the priest, who now refused to take confessions in person. One evening, Matteo returned from carrying bodies to the hill and found another mark on his own door. This one wasn't ink. It was dark, soft, bruising smudge, as though thin fingers had pressed there and lingered a moment too long. He scrubbed it until his knuckles split. Inside, his daughter's fever burned higher. Elizabeth's will shrank to the bed, the window, and the shifting shadows in the corner of her vision. She saw faces there sometimes, dissolving when she tried to focus. The walls breathed faster. The ceiling bowed lower. On the fourth night, she heard footsteps in the hall outside her room. Slow, measured. Not her father's limp, worn down from hauling carts. Not the quick patter of her neighbour's boy bringing food and leaving it on. The step. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. They stopped at her door. Her heart thudded so loudly. She thought whoever stood outside must hear it, must feel it through the wood. "Papa," she whispered. Silence. Then very slowly, the latch turned. The door did not fully open. Just a crack, wide enough for a draft to slip through, wide enough for a shadow to reach in. "Do not be afraid," the voice from her dream said, though her name never passed its lips. "You are not singled out. You are only part of the sum." She tried to scream for her father, but her throat only produced a dry croak. The door opened wider, It stood there cloaked and tall, its presence somehow too large for the small room beneath the hood. The pale skin shifted and rolled, faces pressing forward and fading. For a moment she saw her own sweat, damp hair, eyes wide and wild, pushed from the blankness, then vanished beneath a tide of others. You were on the dock, it said. You watched me come, you watched, and you did not turn away. I couldn't have stopped you, she whispered. There is always someone who could have stopped me, it murmured. In every town, in every port, in every house where a stranger knocks and is let in. It stepped closer. The air around it was cold, but not the natural cold of winter. This was the absence of warmth itself, the kind found in cellars where light has never touched stone. I tried to close the harbour, she said, desperate. My father, Your father closed the gates when I was already inside, it said. Door after door, shut tight. How generous you are with the locks once the horse has bolted. Something in its tone, almost amused, vaguely pitying, made her skin crawl worse than any touch. You are cruel, she forced out. Cruel. The shifting faces all seemed to smile at once beneath the skin. You sing songs of war and call it glory. You starve your own and call it order. I am a mirror, nothing more. Its sleeves lifted, and again she saw the hollow inside, full of whispering. This time, the voices were clearer. Elizabeth, they called softly. Elizabeth, come. Her grandmother, who had died when she was only just a child, the old baker whose shops now stood locked and cold, the boy who used to race her along the harbour wall, their names fluttering through her like dry leaves. They are waiting, said the visitor. There is always room for one more. In the days that followed, San Aurelio emptied. Some fled into the countryside, carrying the visitor with them in their lungs, under their skin. Others stayed, waiting for relief from the distant king, from the church, from some mercy that never arrived. The priest stopped holding mass and began digging trenches instead. The ship in the harbour continued to rot. Its hull saged and sagged. Its mast leaned, stormed clawed at it. Yet whenever anyone glanced towards the pier from the safety of the hill, it seemed, inexplicably, to be a little close to land. Burn it, someone said at last. It's full of death, another answered. Death is already here, Matteo growled. His hands were raw, his eyes ringed in grey. When he closed them, he saw his daughter reaching out to him, fingers shaking when he opened them. He saw only the empty doorway of her room. He gathered the remaining men who could still stand. They carried torches and oil. That evening, as the sky bled into purple, they went down to the harbour. The stench met them halfway. It was heavier now, like the old cloth left damp too long. Rats skittered along the rope and vanished into cracks. The men boarded the ship, sloshed oil on the decks, into the hold. Against the warmed planks of the cabin. Ready? Matteo asked. They nodded, though no one looked at him for long. He touched the flame of his torch to the oil. Fire took gladly. It spread in quick fingers, licking at wood, at old cloth, at ropes slick with salt. The men retreated to the dock, watching as the ship crackled and flared, sparks leaping into the darkening sky. As the flames climbed, something strange happened. For a moment, just for a moment, the fire stopped moving. It froze in place, a sculpted wave of orange and gold. The smoke hung in the air as though someone had drawn it in their ink. The crackling ceased. The waves against the hull went silent. The world held its breath. On the burning deck, a single figure appeared. It stood at the bow, cloaked and still, its edges flickering with the fire as though light itself could not decide whether to touch it. From the dock, the men could not see its face, but they felt its attention settled over them, cold and heavy. Do you think this vessel binds me? The voice came, not into their ears, but into their bones. I rowed this ship to your shore because you built it. I rode your trade, your hunger for cloth and spice and coin. I rode your greed. Matteo staggered back, the torch slipping from his hand and clattering to the stone. You cannot burn what you are, the visitor said. Then the fire roared back to life, louder than before, as if making up for that held breath. The ship blazed, shattered and slowly sank, charred pieces hissing into the water. The figure did not sink with it. When the men looked up, shaking, it was gone. That night, the bells of the church rang again, long and low, not for any single dead, but for the town itself. Years passed. San Aurelio never fully recovered. The plague burned through, as all fires do, leaving behind empty houses. And the few who survived, marked in ways no one could see above their sleeves. Children grew up playing in the streets where windows stayed shuttered for no good reason, where people avoided the pier even when the fish were plentiful. They told stories that winter. Most of the stories were wrong. They said the ship arrived with no name on its prow. It had one. They said the bodies on board had eyes that never closed. They did. They said the town had been spared the worst by a brave priest or a noble family or a miracle. It hadn't. No one spoke of the girl who had stood on the dock in her red scarf, watching. No one spoke of the inspector who had tried to burn a single ship, as if that could destroy the road the visitor walked on. But sometimes on fog-heavy mornings, when the tide was high and the air so still that even birds seemed to hold their flight, people swore they saw another vessel out on the horizon. Just a shape, just a suggestion, drifting, always drifting. If you stood on the pier with the mist curling around your ankles and listened closely past the slap of waves and the creak of ropes, you might hear something else. A soft, endless whisper, as if 1,000 mouths were speaking against your skin from very far away. Make room, make room, make room. And if you stay too long, watching, something might turn. Its not face toward you from that distant shrouded deck. Because it is always the same story, really. There is always a ship, and there is always a harbour. And somewhere, there is always someone who will stand there and watch it come in, telling themselves that they are only looking, that looking does no harm. That is the end of this story. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. And we will see you tomorrow.
The sun had long since set over Hollow Glen, a small town that had once been full of laughter and life. Now, since the streets were silent except for a low, shuffling murmurs that echo off cracked storefronts and empty bones. The smell of decay hung heavy in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of wilted flowers from a long forgotten garden. Eli moved slowly through the town square, his footsteps dragging slightly, leaving a faint trail of dirt behind him. The world around him felt strange, muted, distant, as if wrapped in thick fog. He had awoken 3 days ago in the remnants of what looked like a hospital room. His memory fractured and his body aching with a cold that sank deep into his bones. Since then, he had wandered aimlessly, trying to piece together what had happened. What unsettled him most, though, were the others. They were everywhere, figures with pale, ashen skin and hollow eyes. They shuffled through the streets, groaned softly, and sometimes reached out with trembling hands. Eli had expected them to attack, to snarl or bite, like the monsters from the old movies. He remembered, but they didn't. When they saw him, they paused. Their cloudy eyes followed him, their heads tilting slightly, as if in recognition or confusion. Then, slowly, they would move aside, giving him room to pass. At first, Eli had been too terrified to move, but as the hours turned to days, he began to realize something unsettling. They weren't hostile at all. Some even seemed to smile, a faint twitch of cracked lips as he walked by. One had tried to hand him a broken locket, placing it gently in his palm before continuing on its way. Tonight, as the wind swept through the empty square, Eli stopped in front of the fountain. The water had long dried up, and moss grew thick along its rim. He caught his reflection in the cracked marble. Pale skin, darkened veins beneath his eyes, lips with no warmth in them. He reached up, touched his cheek, and felt how cold it was. A flicker of movement caught in his eye. Across the square, a group of others gathered beneath a street lamp that sputtered weakly against the darkness. They were watching him, silent and still. A small girl among them, no more than 10, by her size, raised a hand and waved. Eli hesitated, then slowly waved back. The group began to shuffle closer, surrounding him in a loose circle. None of them spoke, but he could feel something passing between them, a kind of understanding, a recognition deeper than words. One of them, a tall man in tattered clothes, reached out and gently touched Eli's shoulder. His hand was cold, but not hostile. It was almost comforting. For the first time since he had woken, Eli didn't feel afraid. He looked around at their faces, some decayed, some barely holding on to fragments of who they once were. And a terrible realization began to creep through his mind. The air around him seemed to hum, the silence pressing down as the truth whispered at the edges of his thoughts. The reason they did not attack him, the reason they looked at him with familiarity, the reason the air tasted like ash when he breathed. He turned his eyes once more to the cracked fountain, to the pale figure reflected there, eyes sunken, skin grey, lips the colour of dust, and he understood. He was one of them. The night deepened as a pale moon rose above the rooftops of Hollow Glen, casting a silvery glow over the ruined town. Eli remained by the fountain, surrounded by the quiet gathering of the dead. They stood motionless now. Their attention was fixed on just him, as if waiting for something. They were all waiting. Some signal or word that he didn't know how to give. He felt their presence like a whisper at the edge of thought, a strange empathy that pressed against his mind. They were not mindless. Beneath the hollow stairs, there was sorrow, a deep, aching grief that rippled through them all. It felt ancient, heavy, as if it had been there for a long time before the world had fallen apart. The little girl who had waved to him earlier shuffled closer. Her hair hung in a brittle strands, and her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. In her small hands she clutched a wilted daisy. She extended it toward him. Eli hesitated, but took it. The stem broke his cold finger, and for a moment, something flickered across his memory. Bright sunlight, laughter, a woman's face, her voice, calling his name. Then it was gone, leaving only the silence. He wanted to ask them who they were, what had happened, but his voice felt trapped. somewhere in his chest, deep in his chest. When he tried to speak, only a dry rasp escaped his throat. The others tilted their heads slightly at the sound, then began to move again. Slowly, deliberately, turning toward the old church that stood at the far end of the square. The tall man gestured for Eli to follow. Eli had the only option but to obey. Eli obeyed. They moved as a group, a procession of the forgotten. Their shuffling footprints echoing softly against the cracked cobblestone. The world felt different in their presence. The air was still, almost reverent, as if the night itself were holding its breath. When they reached the church, the doors were already open. Candles burned inside, flickering weakly in the drafts that whispered through shattered stained glass. The scent of melted wax and damp earth filled the air. Inside, pews had been pushed aside, and in the centre of the nave lay a figure covered with tattered sheet. The tall man knelt beside it, bowing his head. The others followed suit, forming a silent circle around the body. Eli stood uncertainly at the edge, unsure what he was witnessing. Then one by one, they began to hum, a low, mournful sound that resonated through the hollow church. It wasn't a song of the living. It was something older, a lament that spoke of its loss, of its memory, of all of the endings that refused to end. The sound crept into Eli's bones, stirring something within him that he didn't understand. As the song swelled, he felt the pull of a memory again, a flash of light, and then a scream, the crash of glass. A face, pale and frightened. His face, pale and frightened. His own hands, red, trembling. And then, darkness. He gasped and staggered back. The others stopped their song, their eyes turning toward him. The tall man rose and reached out again, his cold fingers brushing Eli's arm. The gesture was neither threatening nor comforting this time. It was a reminder, a connection. A connection Eli would remember. Eli looked down at the sheet-covered body, and the truth struck him like a blade. He knew that face beneath the fabric. He had seen it in mirrors, in photographs, in fleeting glimpses of who he had once been. The dead were mourning him. The candles burned low, their light trembling against the church walls like dying stars. Eli stood frozen as the realization spread through him, hollow and cold. The body beneath the sheet, the one they had gathered around, the one they mourned, was his. His body was lying there, lifeless, and he remembers. He wanted to deny it, to tear the sheet away and prove himself wrong. But some instinct deep inside whispered that the truth had already taken root. He knew the weight of that silence, the shape of that stillness. His body, his former body, lay there, unmoving, while he stood apart from it. The tall man who had led him there slowly turned, his eyes heavy with something that resembled pity. He stepped closer and placed a hand over Eli's chest, right where his heart should have been beating. Nothing, no rhythm, no warmth, just the faint vibration of the dead world around them. Eli staggered backward, breath catching, or trying to. He realized then that he hadn't truly breathed since he'd awoken. The act of inhaling was just a habit, an echo of what he'd once done to survive. But there was no air filling his lungs, no pulse thrumming beneath his skin. The others began to move again, forming a slow procession around the body. Their voices rose in another low hum, softer now, more distant. It felt like the morning, and more like release. Eli felt the vibrations in the air tremble through him, resonating with the emptiness inside his chest. He stepped forward once more, drawn by something he couldn't name. His fingers trembled as he reached towards the shrouded form. The sheet felt cool, the fabric brittle with time. he lifted it. Beneath was a pale, sunken face. His own. The lips were grey and slightly parted. The eyes, his eyes, were clouded over, staring at nothing. His hair clung to his forehead, matted with dried blood. The sight should have horrified him, but it didn't. Instead, a calm, weary sadness filled him, as though he had simply found something he had been missing for far too long. The little girl approached again, her tiny footsteps almost soundless. She held out the daisy, the same one she had given him earlier, though it now seemed fresh and whole. The petals bright and alive. She placed it gently on the chest of the corpse and then looked up at him. The hum quieted, and in that stillness, Eli felt something stir in the air, like a sigh carried by unseen wind. The others began to drift away, one by one, vanishing into the dark corners of the church. Soon only he and the girl remained. She stared at him for a moment longer, her gaze calm but knowing. Then she turned and walked toward the open doorway, disappearing into the pale light outside. Eli lingered beside his body. The candlelight flickered over his dead face, casting shadows that danced across the stone floor. He thought about the days since he'd awoken. The silence, the cold, the way the others had looked at him with something like kindness. He wasn't their prey. He was their kin. When he finally left the church, dawn was breaking. The world outside was bathed in ghostly glow, neither warm nor cold, but timeless. The others were gone, leaving only the faint impression of their footprints in the dirt. Eli looked towards the horizon and began to walk. He didn't know where he was going or why, but the silence no longer felt empty. It was full of memory, of sorrow, and of unspoken understanding. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled once, and then went quiet. He didn't flinch. He simply kept moving, one slow step at a time, into a world that no longer belonged to the living. Days passed, though time had lost its meaning. The sky stayed the same pale grey. No matter how far Eli walked, the air never warmed, never cooled. Even the wind carried no scent of life, only dust and echoes of things long gone. He wandered beyond the ruins of Hollow Glen, through empty fields, where the grass grew brittle and colourless. Occasionally, he would see others like him, figures moving in the distance, slow and aimless, always watching but never approaching. There was no fear among them, no hunger, only the quiet recognition that they all shared the same strange fate. But something began to change when Eli reached the edge of the forest. There, at the border where the cracked asphalt road met the tangled roots of ancient trees, he heard a sound that did not belong to this world. It was faint at first, a soft rhythm carried by the wind. Then, unmistakably, a voice, not the hollow groans of the dead, not the low humming of his kin, a living voice. He froze, every sense sharpened. The forest loomed dark before him, branches swaying like skeletal arms. Beneath their canopy, the sound grew clearer. Footsteps, hurried, human, and then laughter, real laughter, raw and bright, like something from another lifetime. He stepped closer, drawn by instinct. Through the trees, he caught a glimpse of them. A small group huddled near a campfire. The flames licked the air greedily, casting warm light over their faces. Their skin was flushed with heat and colour. Their movements were alive. They passed around a tiny tin pot, steam curling upward. The smell of smoke and food filled the air. It hit Eli like a memory made flesh. He watched them from the shadows, unable to move closer. The warmth of the fire seemed to push against him, a barrier his body no longer understood. His fingers twitched, reaching for it, but the light stung his skin. Not pain, exactly. More like rejection, like the world of the living itself was turning him away. One of the people by the fire turned suddenly, glancing into the trees. It was a woman with sharp eyes and a scar along her cheek. Her gaze locked onto his shape in the dark. "Who's there?" she called out. Eli froze. Her words were sharp, cutting through the silence. The others turned, grabbing makeshift weapons. Pipes, knives, and a rusted rifle. He tried to step back quietly, but a branch cracked under his foot. They heard flashlights flicked on, beams cutting through the dark. They landed on him. His pale face, his sunken eyes, his torn clothes. The living recoiled instantly, their faces twisting in fear and disgust. "Zombie," one of them shouted. The group surged forward, weapons raised. Eli lifted his hands, trying to speak, to say no, to tell them he wasn't like the others. But only a low, broken sound escaped his throat, a groan like every other corpse that had ever stumbled from the dark. The rifle went off. The sound split the air. Eli fell to his knees, though not from pain. The bullet, on the other hand, tore through him, but there was no blood, no agony, just a dull impact of something that didn't matter anymore. The living hesitated, unsure, watching as he struggled to his feet again. He didn't approach, didn't attack. He only stared at them with eyes that once held life. The woman with the scar lowered her gun slightly, confusion flickering in her expression. "It's not," she began, but the others shouted over her, "Finish it." The shot came again, and this time Eli turned and fled into the trees. The forest swallowed him whole. He ran until the firelight was gone, until the living voices faded into the distance. When he finally stopped, the world was silent again. His breath, if it could be called that, came in slow, empty gasps. He looked down at his chest, at the hole where the bullet had passed through. Nothing leaked out, nothing healed. He sank to the ground and sat there for a long time, staring into the endless dark between the trees. The living feared him. The dead welcomed him. And in the hollow space between, Eli finally understood what he had become. Not a man, not a monster, but something trapped in the quiet space where life just refused to end. Eli lingered in the forest for what felt like days. Time slipped away like the mist between his fingers, impossible to hold and impossible to measure. The trees whispered softly above him, their branches bending like curious watchers. In their slow, creaking song, he thought he could almost hear words, faint echoes of things that had once been spoken by the living. He no longer felt hunger, nor thirst. The ache of his body was constant, but distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Every step he took made the world feel thinner, stretched between two realities. The warmth he could no longer touch, and the cold that would not let him rest. The wound from the bullet had begun to close, not in the way of healing, but in the way of time forgetting. The flesh drew together, grey and stiff, leaving only the faintest mark. He realized then that death did not rot him further. It preserved him in the shape of his final moments, forever incomplete. As he wandered deeper into the forest, he found signs of the living. Footprints, a torn scrap of cloth, a broken lantern. Each one stirred something in him, a faint pulse of that memory that hurt more than waves, sounds, and wounds. He could feel their warmth, even from a distance, like sunlight through glass. Eventually, the trees began to thin, and Eli stepped into a clearing where a stagnant pond reflected the pale sky. The surface was still and black, a mirror of the dead whirled above it. He approached slowly, drawn to the reflection, to what waited beneath. When he looked down, he expected to see the same hollow face from the church, the one he had already accepted as his own. But what stared back at him was different. His reflection was alive. It was his face, as it once had been. His eyes were bright, his cheeks full of colour, and breath fogging in the cold morning air. The living Eli blinked up from the water, confused. He mouthed something, words Eli couldn't even hear, though he knew exactly what they were. Why are you still here? The reflection's lips moved again, faster now. Eyes were wide in terror. The water began to ripple, distorting the image, until it broke apart into fragments. Eli fell to his knees besides the pond, reaching toward it, desperate to hold on to that fleeting glimpse of life. His fingers touched the surface, and the water turned black. It swallowed the reflection whole, devouring the image of warmth and colour. The surface boiled with shadows, faces pressing against it from below. Dozens of them. There were men, there were women, and there were children, all with the same hollow eyes. Their mouths opened in silent screams, bubbles rising from their lips like lost words. Eli stumbled backward, but the sound, no. The feeling filled his mind. 1,000 memories bleeding into one. Laughter, pain, pleading, fear. And beneath it all, one truth whispered again and again. You did this. He didn't understand. Couldn't. But the faces beneath the surface were relentless. Each one a fragment of the world he could no longer remember. And then, among them, he saw her, the woman from his memory, the one who had screamed before everything went dark. Her eyes met his through the murk off the pond. They were not angry. They were sad. Eli had reached out once more. His hands were trembling as it hovered over the water. The ripples slowed. The reflection steadied. She mouthed a single word. Come. There Then the water went still. Eli stood there in silence, the forest holding its breath around him. The air felt heavier now, as though the world itself had turned its gaze upon him. He looked once more into the black surface and saw nothing. No reflection, no light, no life, just darkness, waiting. And for the first time since his awakening, Eli took a step towards it. Eli stepped into the pond. The water was colder than anything he had ever felt. Colder than death itself. But it did not resist him. It accepted him, pulling him down gently, like a mother guiding a child to rest. As he sank, the faces beneath the surface rose to meet him. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, not with anger, but with understanding. The woman's hand reached out, her touch warm at last, and for a brief, fragile moment, he felt alive again. The world around him shivered, the darkness softening into light, and the ruined town, the empty church, the endless forest, they all began to fade, dissolving into quiet peace. The voices of the dead became a single soothing hum that filled the void where his heartbeat used to be. When the light finally faded, there was only still water in the pond. Calm, undisturbed, reflecting the pale morning sky. The wind passed gently through the trees, carrying a single daisy across the surface before letting it drift away. And Hollow Glen was silent once more.
How does one live in a world by themselves? Well, a lone car drives through a fog so thick it seems alive. The headlights cut a narrow path through the grey void. You ever drive somewhere and forget how you got there? Like the world blinked and you just appeared. That's what it felt like when I reached Mallow Creek. The car slows. A rusted town sign appears through the mist. Welcome to Mallow Creek. Population 1,247. The 7 is scratched out. Beneath it, someone has scrawled none. The town looks normal, empty but alive. Lights glow behind curtains. A faint radio hum drifts from a diner, but no people. The narrator steps out of his car, scanning the silence. There were signs of life. Coffee cups still steaming, curtains swaying, but no one. No goddamn one. The bell over the door chimes as he enters. Every table is half used. Plates of food still warm. A jukebox plays softly. Hello? Anybody there? Silence. Then faint laughter. Distant. Distorted. As if coming from inside the walls. He turns. Nothing. The laughter stops. The man steps into the street, uneasy. The fog glows, faintly orange, from a nearby streetlight. Maybe they were hiding. Maybe there was a gas leak. That's what I told myself. He walks past a toy store where a rocking horse moves on its own. He doesn't see a dozen of silhouettes watching him from behind fogged glass windows. Faces blurred, unrecognizable. The narrator breaks in. He rummages for supplies and finds an old lighter. I thought I was alone, and when you think you're alone long enough, you stop caring what happens. He flicks the lighter, stares at the flame, just to see if I can still make something happen. He tossed the flame onto an old rag soaked in oil. It catches. He watches, hypnotized, as the small fire grows. The building erupts in flames. The narrator steps back, watching as smoke spirals into the fog. There was something beautiful about it. The way the fire filled the silence. He doesn't notice people screaming inside the fire. Faint silhouettes writhing in the blaze. Invisible to him, but fully real. A child's voice echoes faintly through the smoke. Why are you doing this? The narrator looks around. No one's there. He laughs nervously, then stops. The laughter doesn't stop. It grows louder. Dozens of voices, all laughing from everywhere. From nowhere. The narrator wakes up in a cold sweat. The clock reads 3:33 a.m. He looks out the window. The fire still burns in the distance. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe not. He sees a shadow move in the reflection of the window, standing beside him. He turns. Nothing. The fire from the gas station still smoulders. Ash floats through the pale dawn like black snow. I stand at the edge of the ruin, dazed. I thought it would draw them out. Smoke, noise, heat. Something to make them come see. But no one came. He picks up a half-burned photo from the ground. A family of 4 smiling. The diner behind them. I frown. This was taken yesterday. He turns the photo over in shaky handwriting. For our dear town, forever together. He walks down the street again, but this time the world feels off. Doors close by themselves. Curtains shift as if following him. A group of invisible voices whisper from nearby. That's him. The one who burned them. He doesn't even know. I stop, spinning around. Who said that? Who's there? Silence. Then a car slams its brakes. Tires screech. I turn just in time to see nothing. The car crash. The car crashes into a lamppost on its own. I didn't touch it. I didn't do anything at all. But it looked like I did. I enter cautiously. Shelves are stocked. Shopping carts left mid-aisle. A faint whispering chorus fills the air. He picks up a jar of jam, and it flies from his hand. smashing on the floor. He jumps back, panicked. Why won't he stop? Mummy, is he going to hurt us too? Where are you? He runs to the end of the aisle, ripping aside a curtain. Nothing. The voices vanish instantly. Then he sees security camera monitors near the counter, each one showing live footage of the store. On the screens, the store is full of people, terrified, pressed against the walls, staring directly at him. They were there the whole time, watching me. I just couldn't see them. I stumble outside, shaken. He yells into the empty square. I'm not your enemy. Do you hear me? I don't even know you. A voice echoes from somewhere unseen. Soft. Familiar. You're not supposed to be here. Who are you? No answer. He looks around, breathing hard. The world feels thinner. Unreal, like a dream about to collapse. The man enters a dusty gym. Children's drawings cover the wall. Stick figures holding hands. A bright sun. The words, "We are still here." He lights a match, staring at it. The same morbid fascination as before. I thought maybe they'd show themselves again. Maybe the fire would pull them out. He flicks the match toward a pile of old papers. It catches. Flames rise, licking the gym walls. He smiles faintly, then stops. Children's screams echo from the flames. But all it was, make them scream louder. The fire alarms blare. Smoke pours out. Outside, invisible figures run past him, bumping into his shoulders. Unseen, but real. He's shoved to the ground. A police siren wails. A patrol car screeches up. Empty. No driver visible. Over a megaphone, a disembodied voice booms. Lie down, hands where we can see them. I freeze, trembling, confused. There is no one there. He looks at his own hands. Smoke stains. His skin is black. And then, for just a moment, he sees them. Hundreds of people watching him. Faces twisted in horror and hatred. Then, gone, like the fog swallowed them whole. They are not the ghosts. I don't believe. Maybe I am the ghost. Maybe I was never supposed to be seen. I do not belong in this town. The fog has thickened. The moon is a pale coin behind clouds. The narrator, me, I walk along a cracked road leading out of town. His clothes still streaked with soot. His face is hollowed out, half by exhaustion, half by disbelief. I tried to leave. I thought maybe the fog would break if I just kept walking. But every road bent back toward the same sign. He stops. Before him, the same rusted "Welcome to Hollow Creek" sign. Smoke from the burned gym still curls in the distance. He laughs bitterly. Of course it does. He kicks the sign hard, and the metal clangs, echoing unnaturally far. The sound doesn't fade. It doubles back, growing louder. repeating his own kick in eerie synchronization. Clang, clang, clang. He stumbles backward. The fog seems to breathe. He walks back through the town. The streets are wet, slick with fog dew. Every shop window now reflects something wrong. Not him exactly, but a darker version. A mirror self. In the reflection, he sees himself smiling, head tilted, unnaturally. There is a theory that mirrors don't show us how we look. They show us what's left behind. He moves closer to one of the windows. A barber shop. Inside, chairs overturned, scissors glinting. In the glass reflection, his mirrored self is sitting calmly in the chair, watching him. You're not supposed to be here. I spin. The shop is empty. When he turns back to the glass, his reflection is gone. A single light burns in the old town library. He enters slowly, the door creaking open. Dust floats in beams of moonlight. Books are scattered everywhere. And as he steps deeper, faint whispers rise from the shelves. Hello? The whispers from words, voices overlapping, out of sync. He burns. He forgets. He was one of us. I pull a book from the shelf. Its cover reads Hollow Creek, a town remembered. Inside, photos of the same places he destroyed. The diner, the gym, the gas station. All intact. Smiling families, kids playing. He flips to the last page. A group photo. Hundreds and hundreds of townspeople have all gathered in the square at the centre. Was I, me, in the centre of them all? That's me. But I don't remember this. I touch the page,
and the ink ripples like water. The people in the photo turn their back toward him. Their smiles vanish. You left us here. He drops the book. The floorboards groan, and the lights flicker. The library's whispers turns into a rising chorus of screams. He bursts through the doors, panting. The building behind him goes dark. Every light extinguished. He looks up and sees faint shapes moving behind the windows, dozens of silhouettes pressing their hands against the glass. I thought I was the only one who couldn't see. But maybe they're the ones who can't let me go. Thunder rumbles. He pushes open the doors of an old church at the end of the town. Candles burn in perfect circles along the pews. A voice hums low, haunting a tune from somewhere unseen. My grandmother used to say, if you hear singing in an empty church, do not answer. It means the dead are talking to each other. He moves towards the altar. A mirror stands where the crucifix should be. Tall, ornate, cracked down the middle. His reflection appears again, but this time it's moving on its own. Who are you? You were one of them. Once. Before you forgot. Forgot what? That you died here. No, I stagger backwards. That's not true. You burn the town trying to leave. And every time it happens again, you come back, pretending you're alive. The reflection tilts its head. Eyes pitch black now. You built this purgatory yourself. We just live in it. The mirror cracks further. A thin line creeping across the glass. Then a hand bursts through, his own hand, grabbing his throat. I scream, clawing at the reflection's grip. But it's ice cold, and his fingers pass right through it like smoke. He falls backward. I fall backward. The mirror shatters. He crawls into the rain. Lightning flashes. For a moment, he sees the town filled with people again. They are everywhere. Firefighters, parents, children, lovers, all soaked in ash and grief. They are looking at me. But when the thunder rolls, they vanish again. Only the fog remains. Every face was a memory I couldn't hold. Every scream was a sin I forgot I made. I looked down. His reflection is in a puddle, flickers, glitching like a corrupted video. His eyes blacken for a second, and then the reflection smirks. He's back in the same motel room as before, trembling, soaked. The TV is on, flickering static. He tries to speak, but his voice comes out doubled. His tone layered with a whisper behind it, like two people sharing the same mouth. Am I real? The static clears for a split second, revealing news footage of himself standing outside the burning gym. The camera pans, shows invisible people screaming and pointing. Then the anchor's voice cuts in. The Hollow Creek fire, believed to be caused by one man, known only as the Stranger. He lunges at the TV, punches it. The TV glass shatters. The sparks fly. The room flickers like a strobe light. In the broken TV screen, his reflection remains, unharmed, watching him. The reflection says, It's almost time. Rain floods the town. Lightning cuts through the fog. The narrator stands in the middle of the street, drenched, screaming into the storm. If I am dead, show me the truth. Thunder answers. The streetlights flicker and go out one by one toward him in a straight line. When the last one dies, the entire town freezes. Everything becomes silent. Then faintly, the fog parts. At the far end of the street stands a figure. His reflection, solid now, wearing my exact clothes, but clean, untouched by soot or rain. They face each other across the empty street. For the first time, I saw him clearly. The man I'd been running away from. The man I had always been. The reflection raises a hand. The narrator, me, I, mirrors it without meaning to. The air ripples between them like heat. Every time you destroy us, we rebuild. Every time you awaken, we die again. I didn't mean to. You never mean to. The fog explodes outward, revealing flashes, memories, burning buildings, screaming faces, a car crash, a church engulfed in flames. He's at the center of all of them, over and over, a cycle repeating endlessly. He drops to his knees, covering his ears. They weren't ghosts. They were victims, and I was the haunting. Rain turns to mist again. He stands alone in the square, surrounded, engulfed, trapped by ash and silence. The morning sun bleeds weakly through the clouds. He looks down, and for the first time, he sees faint footprints all around him. Hundreds and hundreds of footprints. leading into the fog. I follow them, but with every step, the footprints fade. Maybe they forgive me, maybe they don't, but if I can't see them, maybe that's my punishment. He reaches the edge of the town. The sign stands before him again, rusted, eternal. He looks at it one last time, then walks past. The camera pans slowly down to the sign. The population number has changed. 1,248. The fog has begun to lift. For the first time, sunlight pierces the grey, thin and sickly, but real. I walk alone through the ruins. The air is still heavy with the scent of burned wood and wet ash. I thought the sun would burn it all away. The voices, the ghosts, the guilt. But the light didn't change anything. It just made me see clearer. He passes the charred school gym, the collapsed diner, the melted gas pumps, the trail of my destruction. Everywhere he looks, I see the faint shapes of people, blurry, flickering outlines, drifting like smoke. They are not angry now. They are just watching. I stop in the center of the square. The cracked fountain still trickles water, red with rust. A single object sits on the rim. A child's teddy bear, scorched black. Its button eyes melted. He picks it up. I didn't remember the child's face, but my hands remembered the weight. He holds it to his chest, trembling. From the fog, a woman's voice drifts slowly and softly. You can't stay here anymore. He turns, and the woman's silhouette forms out of the mist. It's his reflection again, but softer now, human, sorrowful. If I go, what happens to them? They move on, You're the one keeping them here. Then what happens to me? You already know. He walks towards the town limit once more. The same welcome to the Hollow Creek sign awaits ahead. The population numbers flickers, glitching between 1,248 and 0. He, I, me, stops in motion. The air feels colder now. Sharp, almost metallic. I thought death was silence, but it's not. It's memory looping forever. Until you finally listen. He kneels beside the sign, sets the teddy bear at its base. Then he takes out the lighter. His hand shakes as he flicks it. A small flame dances in the wind. One more fire. Just one to end it right. He drops it on the ground, but this time the fire spreads through him, not the earth. His clothes ignite, yet he doesn't scream. He just stands there, staring into the distance. As he burns, as I burn, the fog begins to thin completely, revealing the full town at last. People fill the streets. Real, solid, alive. Children run, shopkeepers open doors. The town looks reborn. The narrator smiles weakly through the flames. I see you now. The people stop, looking towards him. They don't scream. They just nod. One by one, in a quiet recognition. The woman from before steps forward, whispering, "Thank you." The light swallows everything, and the fire is gone. The streets are completely empty, peaceful. The town now reads, "Welcome to Hollow Creek. Population 1,248. and 47. The 7 is whole again. The camera pans slowly towards the horizon. At the edge of the fog, a faint figure. The narrator walks away down the road, fading into the sunlight. No footprints follow him this time, and I was the ghost all along. Or maybe I was just the sin that needed to burn away. You see, this has happened on 3 separate occasions. The narrator, him, and I